Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nuril Habibatu Saida and my friends Piranti Asri Pertiwi and Miftahur Rahma Ayusa Putri. We are from group 5. We would like to present our topic today. The title of our topic is Authentic Assessment.
There are some definitions about authentic assessment based on the expert one, but the conclusion is authentic assessment is based on students' ability to perform meaningful tasks they may have to do in the real world. In other words, this form of assessment determines students' learning in a manner that goes beyond multiple choice tests and quizzes. Authentic assessment means providing assessment opportunities which are like tasks in the real world. This might mean that business students are asked to produce a market analysis report for an actual product, rather than writing an abstract essay on the principle of marketing. Authentic assessment is multiple forms of assessment that reflect students' learning, achievement, motivation, and attitudes on interactionally relevant classroom activities. That's all the definitions of authentic assessment.
Authentic assessment of speaking. Assessment of speaking should focus on students' ability to interpret and convey meanings for authentic purpose in interactive contexts. Teachers need to use assessment tasks which are as authentic as possible in a classroom setting. It means teachers should use authentic language in speaking, set real-world tasks, and give the students opportunities to use language in situations based on everyday life. O'Malley and Pierce 1996 provide some steps in preparing speaking assessment. Those are identifying purpose, planning for assessment, developing scoring procedures, setting standards, selecting assessment activities, and recording information. And the next one is authentic assessment of writing. A teacher can only know the student's writing competence by checking their work in detail. Accordingly, an authentic assessment is seen as the most appropriate method in assessing students' writing skill. The following are the steps in assessing students' writing by using authentic assessment proposed by O'Malley and Pierce 1996. Those are selecting topic that is appropriate for the students, selecting rubrics for scoring students, sharing rubrics with the students, identifying benchmark papers, reviewing how students write, and having a conference with the students on their writing result.
According to O'Malley and Pierce 1996 mentioned that there are three types of authentic assessment. They are performance assessment, portfolios, and student self-assessment. Curriculum 2013 suggests there are three types of authentic assessment: performance, portfolio, and project assessment.
The implementation of authentic assessment. The implementations consist of three parts, namely designing the authentic assessment, implementing the assessment, and scoring students' product and giving feedback to the students. And this is the rubric for assessing speaking skills. After preparing the rubric, the teachers can conduct performance, project, and portfolio assessment in assessing students' English productive skills. For assessing speaking skill, the teachers can use performance assessment. For example, the teachers ask the students to do oral presentation by describing picture and retelling story or text. Ideally, teachers have to document the results of the assessment. This is important to inform the students about their progress in learning process. The information gathered from the record can be used not only to inform instruction and assessment, but also to communicate with the students on how they are doing. It can also provide feedback to the teacher on the effectiveness of teaching materials and activities. In implementing portfolio assessment, the teacher can ask the students to make a written text based on the theme they discuss in every chapter. The first English teacher can make a good English worksheet containing 3 columns. The first column is students' portfolio work. The second column is the revision of students' portfolio work. And the third is score column. The table below shows the rubric for assessing writing. In brief, portfolio assessment requires students together with the teachers to determine what topic and kind of work they will do in the form of writing and the duration of time the assignment can be completed. Within this duration, teachers supervise and observe students' progress, and if there is a problem, then both of teacher and students can solve it together and do some improvement. At the end of the duration, students submit their work which will be evaluated by the teacher. In implementing authentic project assessments, the teacher should assign the students to make a project, for example, producing a comic. First, the teacher should tell the students that they would have a project of making comic. Then the students are divided into some group consists of 3 or 4 students. In their groups, they discuss the idea of the story and the teacher asks them to make the concept of the comic. Having completed with the comic concept, the students submit it to the teacher. Then the teachers give the feedback and return the concept to the students. Finally, the teachers tell the students to make the complete comic based on the corrected concept and submit it in the following weeks or month. For the teachers, they can score the students' product based on the scoring rubric they have made before. After scoring the students' product, the teachers give the students feedback. Wiggins 1993 stated that the important outcomes of authentic assessment has to do with providing feedback to the students related to significance objectives. Many teachers mistakenly believe that they are providing feedback with test score and comments such as good, very good, and unclear. What students want and need is information about their performances and their revisions to make. Students need information that will help them self-assess and self-correct so that assessment becomes integrated with the learning experience.
The next point is about advantage and disadvantage of authentic assessment. There are some advantages of authentic assessment. The first is it helps learning. Authentic assessment provides opportunities to learn while completing the task, especially where feedback is given. The second one is authentic assessment is motivating for students. Authentic assessment motivates students to engage with assessment because tasks are often relevant to their future career path. Students may see the point of the task and can begin to get involved. The third is authentic assessment develop a wide range of skill. Authentic assessment allow a range of skill to be developed because of the real-world demands of the task. This type of assessment does not solely just focus on a small area of abstract knowledge. The last advantage is it's interesting and rewarding for staff. Marking can be a laborious process, but when the students are working on authentic assessment, it may be inherently more interesting for staff too. Meanwhile, there are some disadvantages of authentic assessment. The first is designing the task can be time and imagination. Working closely with colleges, contacts in industry, and getting students involved in shaping the requirements can be helpful. The second is there is a need to make sure that students are fully supported to develop the skills that they will need to achieve the task. It's not enough to transfer knowledge in class and then expect the students to be able to apply this without preparation. The next disadvantage is not all of the students in the class may want to go on the most common career path. For some students, the task presented might not what they have in mind for the future. To assist these students, be vocal in sharing the wider benefits of the type of assessment presented and don't focus entirely on the alignment with the future professional practice. The last is, it is tricky to perform authentic assessment tasks in the course which are not clearly aligned to a profession.
Well, everyone, I'm Piranti Astri Pertiwi. I'm going to continue our next topic. It's about to get started of authentic assessment. Here are some tips to get started with authentic assessment. The first one is be clear what the students need to do, make or produce. Then next, be clear on how the tasks will be marked. What are you looking for in the student's work or performance? Then ensure that the tasks you are getting test the relevant learning outcomes and not something different. If the learning outcomes don't lead themselves to authentic assessment, considering making a change to them using the correct processes at your institution. Next, ensure that the task is manageable in the time available. Remember, students are unlikely to only be undertaking this assessment. They will have other demands on their time, so keep your expectation realistic. The next is involve industry bodies, local business, charities, community group, or other stakeholders to give the assessment an authentic feel. And the next is don't just plan the assessment. Plan the support for assessment. Consider how you will ensure students have the skill to succeed. Better discuss this with the students and identify where support may be most needed. Next is consider where you can introduce the tools and technologies that will exist in the real world, but make sure that you support their use. If third parties are needed to support the use of technology, make sure that the process for this is clear. For example, you may run whole class workshop on specific software, or you make our students group a technical helps meeting where they can resolve any issues and they have been able to resolve themselves. The last is keep college informed. If your university has academic skill support units, it can be very beneficial to keep this team in the loop about your assessment plans so that they are not surprised by students working with less familiar types of tasks who may arrive for additional support, and then release the assessment in the draft form for discussion with college. And the next is how to develop, design, and scoring authentic assessment. First, how can I develop authentic assessment? A suggestion for developing an authentic assessment are first is identify at least one task students need to be able to do the successful in employment and or continuing education, and then work with your fellow faculty, Stafford determine how students might be able to demonstrate their ability to do the tasks. And then identify criteria to evaluate the tasks, and the last is evaluate students' abilities to complete the criteria of the tasks. The next is designing and scoring authentic assessment. To implement the authentic assessment, there are some crucial points that teachers have to prepare. First of all, they have to be able to design an authentic assessment and learning objectives as suitable as possible for the students. Becker suggested the following 8 steps in planning and designing authentic assessment. First is building a team, and then determining the purpose of the authentic assessment, and then the next is specifying objectives and conducting professional development on authentic assessment, and then collecting a sample of authentic assessment and adapting the existing authentic assessment or developing a new one, and then trying out the assessment and reviewing the assessment. In addition, another important point which should be provided is the scoring instrument. The authentic assessment is scored by using a rubric rating scale and a checklist. A rubric is a scoring guide consisting of specific pre-established performance criteria used in evaluating students' work on authentic assessment. There are two types of rubrics: holistic and analytic. A holistic rubric requires a teacher to score the overall process or product as a whole, without testing the components part separately. Whereas in the analytic rubrics, the teacher scores parts, individuals part of the product or performance first, then sum the individual scores to obtain a total score. And then there are 3 types of rating scales, namely a numerical rating scale, a graphic rating scale, and descriptive graphic scale that will serve the teacher well for most purposes. A checklist consists of a list of specific behaviors, characteristics, or activities, or a place for marking whether or not each is present. Teacher may use a checklist for assessing produces students use, products students produce, or behavior students exhibit.
The last point is about the differences between authentic and traditional assessment. The first is authentic assessment requires the students to contextualize and apply what they have learned, but for traditional assessment, ask students about what they learned out of context and tend to encourage rote memorization. The second is force students to work within the ambiguities and key areas present in the real world, but in the traditional assessment, encourage the students to think about the issues in a right versus wrong. The third is authentic assessment challenge students with a fully aware of the task, challenge, and priority setting that is required in solving problems in the real world. But for traditional assessment tends to focus on single answer to problems. The fourth is authentic assessment look at the student's ability to plan, craft, and revise strong and justifiable arguments, performance, and product. For traditional assessment, rarely provide students opportunities to plan, evaluate, adjust, and revise responses. The last difference is authentic assessment often include ambiguous problems and rules that allow the student to practice dealing with ambiguities in the real world. But for traditional assessment, frequently focus on discrete statistics and often arbitrary elements of the skill necessary to work on ambiguous challenges. Well, everyone, that's all is our presentation, and thanks for your attention. We hope it can be useful for you all. And the last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.